And welcome to another data analysis tutorial. Once again, I'm Gabriel Udio and I'm a data analyst at Data Playground. Today's lesson we'll be talking about the analyst mindset and we'll consider how to think before you touch any tool through data analysis. Now, let's have a simple scenario. It's a Wednesday afternoon at TradeFlow, the company which we've been working with since our last video. The weekly operations review has just started, and around the table, you have the head of logistics, you have the marketing manager, you have the finance lead, and your manager, Amina. Now, the CEO, Mr. Okafor, opens with one sentence: customer complaints are up 35% of this quarter. I need to know why and I need to know what we are doing about it before Friday. Now, of course, the room goes quiet for a second. Then, everyone starts talking at once. And then the head of logistics says it's a delivery problem. He assumes drivers must have overloaded in some zones. And so the marketing manager says it's a product quality issue. Some suppliers will be cutting corners. The finance lead says maybe it's just that expectations rose because of maybe a guaranteed 48-hour delivery campaign last month that operations couldn't always fulfill. So everyone has a theory, everyone is confident, and nobody in that room has looked at the actual data yet. Now, Mr. Okafor turns to Amina, and then Amina turns to you, and she says, "Can you figure out what's really going on?" So, this is the moment where the analyst mindset either shows up or it doesn't. And the first thing a good analyst does here is not to open a spreadsheet. The first thing a good analyst does is to slow down and think. So in our last video, we talked about what data analysis is. We looked at how we can turn confusion into clarity so decisions can be made. And so now we need to talk about how you actually do that. When the problem in front of you is vague, when the problem in front of you is messy, when it's politically charged and everyone has an opinion, most of the analytical mistakes I've seen, the wasted hours, the wrong conclusions, the reports nobody acted on, these mistakes did not happen because someone used the wrong formula. They happened because the analyst never properly understood the problem in the first place. They jumped into the data and started finding things without stopping to ask whether they were even looking in the right place. So this chapter is about the discipline to slow down before you speed up. It's not glamorous. Nobody applauds you for it in the meeting, but it's the skill that separates analysts who produce noise from analysts who produce decisions. So we are going to start by looking at symptoms versus real problems. One of the things that sounds obvious, but it trips people up constantly is trying to find the distinction between symptoms and real problems. When someone brings you a problem and what's the in most cases what they describe is almost never the actual problem. In most cases is the symptom, and if you analyze the symptom without finding the real problem underneath, you'd get answers, and the answers you get are answers to the wrong questions. Okay, think about a headache. For a headache, the pain is real, right? You want it to stop, but the headache itself isn't the problem. The headache is a signal. Possibly because you're having that headache because you are maybe dehydrated, maybe you've stayed at screen for say 6 hours, or if you just take painkillers every time without understanding the cause, you are treating the symptom, not the problem. One of the okay, now the truth is business analysis works exactly the same way. Someone says complaints are up 35%, that is a symptom. Someone says revenue dropped last month. That is a symptom. Customer retention is falling. That is also a symptom. Now, behind every symptom is a real problem, a root cause, and finding that is what good analysis is actually about. So, if you try to look at the distinction between a symptom and a real problem, we can see that a symptom actually describes what is changing, why a real problem explains why it's changing. For example, if the symptoms is maybe customer complaints are up 35%, one of the possible real problems could be because delivery times increase after route restructuring. For example, someone says revenue dropped in March. That is a symptom. One of the possible real problems could be that top selling products went out of stock in two countries. Someone says customer retention is falling. One of the possible real problem is that there is no follow-up communication after first purchase. So we need to be able to differentiate between symptoms and real problem. And now, how do you move from symptoms to real problems? You do that by asking one question over and over, and that is by using what? The why. Let's look at the why chain. If you say, okay, complaints are up, why? That's the first why. The first why we ask is what? Maybe delivery times increased. That's another question. Why? TradeFlow restructured delivery zones last month. Why did that affect delivery times? The new zones assigned too many stops to Southwest drivers. Why wasn't that spotted earlier? Nobody was tracking stops per driver as a metric. Now, five why questions deep, and you've gone from a vague symptom to a specific actionable problem. That's the problem worth analyzing. Not complaints are up. Complaints are up is just where you started. So, what does this really look like at work? Now, during the complaints review, the head of logistics immediately said it's a delivery problem. He's not wrong, but he stopped at the symptom. The analyst went deeper. Which complaint types are most common? Delivery complaints. Which zones? Southwest. What's changed there? The answer is a route restructuring 3 weeks ago. Now, what specifically changed? The stops per driver went from 18 to 31. So the real problem wasn't that deliveries are slow. It was the new routes design overloaded Southwest drivers, and nobody had a metric to catch it before the customers did. Now, one of those is vague and uncomfortable. The other is specific and measurable and fixable. Five why questions apart. So let's take a brief look at a simple exercise. Again, I would attach the mail in case you want to submit. I will attach the mail for data playground, and then you can send in your submissions, and I'll try as much as possible to review them and get back to you. So take these three symptoms and practice finding the real problem behind each. You're going to ask why at least three times in a chain, the way we just did. One, we say TradeFlow's electronics categories had its lowest sales month. TradeFlow's electronic category had its lowest sales month of the year in February. The second is the Accra warehouse has the highest employee turnover of all five countries. And the last is average order value has dropped 18% over the past 6 months. So what you are going to do now, you are going to write your chains down. Try not to rush. The goal is to practice the habit of going deeper before you do anything else. Remember, these are symptoms, and for you to try to find the actual problem, you are going to have to ask yourself why over and over until you're able to dig deep to find the root cause of these symptoms. So, moving forward, how can we turn vague requests into clear questions? Now, one of the things that will happen to you constantly is this: people rarely come to analysts with clear, well defined questions. Most times, they could just come with feelings, they come with hunches. They may just say, okay, something feels off with our Kenya numbers, or can you look into the delivery situation? We need more insights about our customers. Say maybe sales seems low. Can you check? Now, those are not analytical questions. They are invitations to go on a fishing trip without knowing what you are fishing for. Now, a weak analyst would, take this as face value, open the data, and come back with a table that doesn't even answer what the person actually needed, because nobody established what that was. A strong analyst, on the other hand, will translate these vague requests into clear questions first, and he can do that using three steps. The first step is to identify the real question behind the request. When someone says we need insights about our customers, they want something specific. They just haven't articulated it yet. So it's your duty to ask, what decision are you trying to make? What would you do differently based on what I find? That answer will tell you the real question. Now, the second step to take is to make the question specific and measurable. A good question is specific, it has clear scope, it's measurable, it's answerable with data, it's relevant to decision making. The answer changes what someone does. So, if you compare, a question that is vague could be, why are sales slow? But a clear question could be, which product categories showed a decline in units sold in the third quarter versus the second quarter, and in which countries was the decline most concentrated? Now that's a clear question compared to the vague question that was initially, why are sales low? Another example of a vague question could be, tell me about our customers. But if you want to make it a clear question, you could ask, what is the average time between a customer's first and second order, and how does that vary by country and segment? This, you are making the questions specific and measurable. Now, the third step is to confirm with the person who asked. Before you start, based on what you've described, I'm planning to look at X and Y. Does that sound right? These are questions that you should communicate with the person giving you the data to work on. 30 seconds of trying to turn vague requests into clear questions can save you 3 days, can save you a lot of time. So let's look at some examples of vague requests and see how they can be translated to clear question. A vague request could be, something feels off with Kenya numbers. That's a vague request. A clear question could be, how do Kenya's order volumes, delivery success rates, and revenue compare to last quarter and our other four countries? Another vague request could be, we need more customer insights. A clear analytical question is, what are the top three characteristics distinguishing customers who buy again within 30 days from those who don't? These are clear analytical questions that will help drive you, that will help you in knowing how to solve the problem. Another example of a vague request could be, check the delivery situation. Your boss wants you and says, check the delivery situation. You, as an analyst, you should ask, what percentage of deliveries missed the 48-hour promise last month by zone and courier partner? Once again, learning how to turn vague requests to clear questions would actually save the time that you spend in carrying out your analysis, and would also help you make better decisions. All right, so let's take another exercise here. We have three vague requests that landed in the analytics inbox this week. Now you're going to translate each one into a clear, specific, and measurable question. Like I said, I'm going to attach the mail for data playground to the description of this video, and feel free to send in your submissions. I'll try to look at as many as I can and give feedback. So the first request came from the CEO. I want to understand our best customers. So, from the head of logistics, the Nairobi warehouse seems to have issues. 3, from the marketing manager, our promotions don't seem to be working. Now, for each of this one, try to write the translated question, then one sentence on what decision it's in service of. So, moving forward, how do we define success before we start? Now, this one is short, but don't mistake it for minor. It's one of the most underrated habits in the job. Before starting any analysis, answer this: how will I know when I've found something meaningful? Now, this sounds simple, but almost nobody does it. If you skip this step, your analysis might become endless. You find one thing, then another, and you come up for air with 20 findings and no idea which ones matter. So defining success means agreeing on two things: the metric that matters, what specific number or comparison will answer the question, and the threshold for action, what will the answer have to show to be worth acting on. If complaints in zone A are 5% higher than zone B, is that meaningful? What about 40% higher? Knowing this in advance would, stop you from overreacting to small differences or underreacting to large ones. So always try to define success before you start. Try to attach numbers to it. That's one of the things I like to. I That's one of the ideas I always like. Trying to attach numbers to this. Now, before starting the complaints analysis, for example, a good analysis will write, I'm looking for delivery zones where the complaints sorry I'm looking for delivery zones where the complaints rates increased more than 15 percentage points since the restructuring. If two or more zones miss this, that's what's escalating. If none do, the problem is more diverse and needs a different approach. 30 seconds of thinking, but the whole analysis now has a definition. It has a destination. You know exactly where you are going. You know exactly what you are going to do with whatever info you come up with. I'm going to read that scenario again so that you see how we're able to define success before starting. Analysis says, I'm looking for delivery zones where complaint rates increase more than 15 percentage points since the restructuring. What does that mean? If you have zones where the complaint was less than 15 percentage points, you would not waste your time trying to analyze such data because it's not part of what should define success for you. You are saying, okay, 15% is what has significant value. So anything from that and above is what I'm going to focus my attention on. So if two or more zones miss this, then that's what's escalating. If none do, the problem needs a different approach. This is going to save you time when you try to define success of your analysis even before you start. Now we are going to look at three thinking frameworks that would actually help to keep you sharp. These tools are not complicated, but they are just ways of organizing your teaching so you don't miss angles or confuse yourself halfway through. So you can think of them like a pilot's maybe pre-flight checklist, not because you don't know how to fly, because even experienced people can miss things under pressure. So the first framework is this: ask so what at every step. Ask the question so what at every step. Now, every time you find something, before moving on, ask so what. Complaints increased 35% this quarter. So what? Who is affected? What should change? Southwest has the highest complaints rate. So what? What does that mean for the decision? So asking the question so what, it's going to keep you from it's going to keep pulling you from findings towards decisions. Okay, so the second framework is separate what you know from what you are assuming. You're always making assumptions as an analyst. There are high chances that you try to make assumptions, and these assumptions could come because you are being biased. So the question is whether you know what the question is whether you know what they are. When the head of logistics said it's a delivery problem, that was an assumption. He had not looked at the data yet. If you remember the scenario that we started this video with. So it's important that you try to write your assumptions down at the start. If you are making assumptions, you write, for example, I'm assuming the complaints data covers all contact channels, not just the app. I'm assuming the restructuring happened on the date I was told. Now, this forces you to notice and test assumptions instead of just trusting them. For example, let me give you a practical scenario. If you were to analyze sales data for, say, a boutique where women's clothes and children's clothes are sold the most, one of the likely assumptions that you make as an analyst is that The highest customers, the highest if you're looking at the gender demographic of customers, you might say that that boutique is likely to have more female customers than male customers. But now that's an assumption that is not based on data, because truth be told is that you could actually have these female customers. It's possible that maybe their husbands or their boyfriends are the ones coming to actually purchase the clothes for them from this clothing store. And so in that case, the highest number of customers coming to the store would actually be male customers. But you would have already made the assumption that female customers are the highest number of customers coming to that particular store to buy their goods. That's an assumption. That assumption was not backed up by data. But before you start your analysis, if you write that assumption down, it's going to give you some level of consciousness when you are trying to make decisions. Now, the third framework is what we call the MECE: cover everything but overlap nothing. MECE simply means mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive. Now, breaking a problem into parts that don't, this involves, breaking a problem into parts that don't overlap, but together covers everything. For example, if you're analyzing complex causes could be product related, could be delivery related, could be customer service related, could be payments related. Now, each of these causes are distinct, but together they are covering every type. So if your categories overlap, you end up double counting. If they don't cover everything, you miss a whole class of problem. So the next thing now is, how do you choose the right problem to work on? Truth be told is that not every problem that lands on your desk deserves the same effort. Some are genuinely important, others are interesting but not urgent, or someone's some you know someone has already answered them and nobody noticed. So before you invest in hours in data analysis, it's always important that you try to ask 4 questions. The first question is this: if we find the answer, will it actually change what someone does? If probably not, you might be analyzing for the sake of analyzing. So don't waste your time. The second is, can this actually be answered with the question we have? Some questions are important, but the data doesn't exist or is not reliable enough to answer those questions. So it's better to know that upfront. Now, the third is this: you ask yourself, is this the right time for this analysis? Sometimes the decision that you get from analysis, it might be a decision that doesn't matter for at least maybe the next 6 months in business. And then the last one is to ask, am I solving the stated problem or the real problem? Because this now is going to take your mind back to symptoms versus the real problem. So make sure you are working on the right one. A senior analyst at TradeFlow keeps a list. Every request could get 2 columns. Now, these 2 columns could be divided into the decision is supports and when that decision needs to be made. Request without clear decision gets sent back with a question. Request where decision date is more than 3 weeks out gets deprioritized. Not laziness, that's discipline. Because every hour that you spend on a low priority request is an hour not spent on something that actually changes a decision. Fine, your analysis is correct, but the decision that you are trying to make might not be necessary at the moment. So let's try to look at another simple exercise here. You try this again. Now, assuming we have 4 requests that came through this week, use the 4 questions to rate each high, medium, or low priority. The first is this: build a complete demographic breakdown of every customer ever. From a junior coordinator, no specific decision mentioned. That's the first one. The second request is this: why are South African delivery costs 28% higher than Nigeria's? Now, the CFO reviews the logistics budgets by Monday. This particular request is coming from the finance lead. This is the second request. Now, the third request is this: Do male or female customers buy more electronics? Now, this particular request was mentioned by the marketing manager while passing at the hallway. And then the last request is this: we are signing a 2-year courier contract for Kenya. Analyze the current courier performance first. Now, this one is coming from the CEO's office. Now, let me just help you out here, and then you go ahead and do your priority by yourself. For the first part, the A, which requires full demographic breakdown of every customer ever, this is coming from a junior coordinator at work, and no particular decision is mentioned. The second case is coming from the finance lead, and the decision, the report you get from it, the CFO is to review it by Monday. Now, the third case here is just a random hallway mention, and the last case here is a 2-year contract that is pending. So it's your duty now to prioritize which one should come first, in that order till the last one. All right. So let's look at the analyst pre-work checklist. Now, before any analysis, no matter how small, it's important that you try to run through this. It takes it takes less than 5 minutes. But less than 5 minutes that you take trying to run this checklist could actually save you hours. First on the checklist is: what is the symptom? What is the real problem? Ask at least three why. Take it deep. Take it to deeper levels. Go at least three whys, because asking up to three whys would actually help you to figure out something before you start carrying out your analysis. Now, the second is this: what is the clear analytical question here? Write it in one specific measurable sentence, because it gives you direction. Now, the third checklist is this: who is going to act on the answer, and what will they do with it? What kind of decision will they make with it? If you can't name the person and the action, it might not be connected to a real decision. Now, the first checklist is this: how will I know when I've found something meaningful? This is where you try to define your metrics for success and threshold first. Now, the fifth on the checklist is: what am I assuming? Remember, assumptions can destroy your whole data analysis process or give you a clear direction. So, whenever you make assumptions, try to write them down. Write as many assumptions as possible. Minimum of three. Yeah, minimum of three assumptions. And now, the last on the checklist is: have I covered all the angles? Are there categories that are overlapping? Run the MECE check. You can decide to print it out if you want. You can stick it on your wall. The best analysts I know will always run checklists, not because they've forgotten how to think, but because they know how easy it is to miss something obvious, when moving fast. So we are going to upgrade our problem framing documents, which we had from our first lesson. That's the previous video. If you have not gone through that video, please try to go back to it and go you know go through it, try to understand it. So this is going to build on the first one. So you are still in your first week, you are still working the customer complaints problem, right? So the first one, the part one now, is you are going to take the complaint symptom and ask why at least 4 times. You're going to try to document the full chain. You ask yourself, where does it lead? What's the problem now? Now, the second thing you are going to do is to write one specific measurable question, capturing what you're actually trying to answer, and explain why it's better than the vague original question, which we started with at the beginning of this video. If you've forgotten it, you can always go back to where we started and try to pick out the whole scenario again. Now, the third one is the success definition. What metrics are you going to look at to determine your success? What threshold makes a finding worth escalating? Now, the first thing you are going to do is your assumptions. You are going to try to list at least 5 assumptions. You try to note which of them you could verify with data and which you would have to take as given. Because remember, we said there are some assumptions that you can verify with data. And then the last thing you are going to do is the MECE check. try to break the possible causes of increased complaints into a MECE structure, no overlaps, and make sure it's full coverage. So here's where we try to wrap it up. The analyst mindset is not about being clever or knowing more frameworks than everyone else. It's just about wanting slow down long enough to understand the real problem before you start solving it. You learn to separate symptoms from real problems using the why chain. You've learned to translate vague requests into clear, specific, and measurable questions. You've learned to define success before starting. You've got three frameworks: the so what, separating knowns from assumptions, and the MECE. Now that would help to keep your thinking clean on any problem you may come across, any industry, any career stage. And you've learned to prioritize, because not every request deserves the same efforts. So none of this that we've explained in this video requires a tool. None of it requires data. That's the whole point of this. Every technical skill you build in this video ahead, every SQL query, every Python function, every dashboard, everything you build in spreadsheets, they are going to become dramatically more powerful because the thinking behind it is now clear. So the only thing that tools do for you is that they amplify your thinking, but they do not replace it. That's what tools do for you. So in the next video, we are going to shift from how to think to what you're actually working with. Data comes in many types, many sources, many states of quality, and not understanding those differences is one of the fastest ways that you can draw wrong conclusions from technically correct analysis. We are going to look at how data is structured. We're going to look at what makes data reliable or dangerous, and we're going to look at how to spot quality problems before they find their way into your work. So thank you for watching this video. Please do well to like this video, to share this video, and to subscribe to this channel. If you check the description of this channel, you'll find the link to our Telegram group chat, our Telegram channel. Please do well to join, and feel free to also send your feedbacks to our mail, which I will attach to the description of this video. We look forward to seeing you in our next section. Thank you.